What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to cover Norman Osborn's Thunderbolts, or continuing our coverage over Norman Osborn's Thunderbolts, and we actually pick up with Secret Invasion. Now, this is the tie-in to the main event. Now, remember, when it comes to Secret Invasion, it was basically an event that Brian Michael Bendis did where we come to find out Skrulls had technically invaded the Earth in a new, different way, which of course were placing people left and right on the Earth and pretending to be those people as a way to bring down the world's defense. And so right now, the entire planet is technically being taken over by Skrulls. That is why it's called Secret Invasion. Now, most Marvel fans know why this storyline is so important when it comes to the character of Norman Osborn. And the reason why, because when it comes to Norman Osborn, at this point, he was the leader of the leader of the Thunderbolts. But right after Secret Invasion, with him kind of saving the Earth by killing off the Queen, it leads to him being in charge of protecting America, which of course he dismantled S.H.I.E.L.D., replaced S.H.I.E.L.D. with a whole new organization called Hammer. And so this is why we're going to cover the tie-in to Secret Invasion, but also get us ready for the Dark Reign era of Norman Osborn, because we covered Siege, we covered Dark Avengers, we covered a lot of different things that happened in Dark Reign, but this book plus Secret Invasion leads into Dark Reign. And so we have to cover this tie-in for our coverage over Norman Osborn's era of Thunderbolts. Now, with that being said, I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. Now, most of the first chapter is really more of the Thunderbolts going after a character known as Swarm. Now, I do want to remind you guys something about the Thunderbolts, and that is basically when it comes to the Thunderbolts, remember Norman Osborn is in charge because after Civil War, the American government basically made a law, and that law was if you're going to be some kind of super being in America, you have to register under that law. Now, of course, you have some people who did not follow that law, and so the American government gave Norman Osborn the ability to be in charge of the Thunderbolts to go after these different characters who are, of course, not registered at all. Now, with that being said, though, right now they're going after Swarm. And Swarm is a D-list character. Basically, it was a scientist, a Nazi scientist that was working on an experiment to control killer bees. And so that is what we're seeing right now. Some kind of dude who hasn't died off yet, who is basically controlling a lot of killer bees. Now, the last time Swarm did appear, he was a smaller size, but this time he's really huge and giving the Thunderbolts a very hard time. Now, this tie-in is basically being written by the same guy who did all those one-shots we covered before covering this book right here. So, Breaking Point, International Incident, Reason of Madness, all those one-shot storylines for the Thunderbolts was written by the same guy writing this storyline right here. And the reason why I'm bringing that up because you do have Moonstone and Norman Osborn trying to give Songbird an idea on how to take down the bees, but she's still upset with Norman Osborn and Moonstone. And you have both characters wonder why she's so upset, and they both think that because Songbird thinks that they had killed off her mother. But we come to find out neither of them actually did kill her mother. And remember, her mom died supposedly in a drunk accident. But for Songbird, she believes Norman Osborn or Moonstone killed her mother. And we come to find out now here that basically neither one of them actually killed her mother. Now, after that moment, you basically do have Norman Osborn and Moonstone realize that when it comes to Swarm, they come to find out they're able to actually see his body. But when they do see his body, they come to find out the only thing that is left is his skeleton. Meaning that the scientist, the Nazi scientist that basically went through the experiment to be able to control a bunch of bees had died years ago. And so the only thing that is left is his skeleton body. But because his powers were tied into his body, it's kind of like his powers have a mind of their own. And so they're still able to actually control the bees, even though he's been dead for who knows how long. And so that is the moment you have the Thunderbolts actually send in Venom. Because remember, when it comes to the 90s and the early 2000s, Venom was down to eat people. At first, it was just brains. Then it evolved into him actually eating people. And so they sent in Venom to actually bite off the head of the skeleton as a way to cancel out the powers to make the bees go away. But of course, the day is now saved. Now, of course, right after Venom does that, you have Norman Osborn very upset with his team because he feels like his team are not doing what they should be doing at their top potential. Right now, they're going around and acting like a bunch of frat boys trying to be heroes when they cannot be heroes. But you didn't have Moonstone realize that, not realize, but you have Moonstone tell Norman Osborn that he has to realize that he put together a team of villains who are not used to working together, but at the same time, they're not really down to be heroes. You're forcing them to be heroes to make yourself look good in front of the American government. And so it's Moonstone saying, get off your high horse. You're mad at us because we're not being like the Avengers or the Fantastic Four. But at the same time, we're still getting the job done, and we have gotten better over the time with you being in charge. And so it's right now Moonstone and Norman Osborn kind of butting heads against each other. Now, once you have the team being able to actually go back to their base and relax, that is the moment you do have Norman Osborn get word from Moonstone that something is going on. Something very important is going on. And so you do have Norman Osborn go back down to see what's happening. And that is the moment he comes to find out that the twin sister of Andrea Strucker, and remember, Andrea Strucker is Swordsman, the twin sister of Swordsman is alive again. Now that is huge because you have to remember the only reason why Swordsman was on the team is because Norman Osborn had promised Swordsman a clone of his dead sister so that Swordsman can be close to his dead sister again. But of course, Norman Osborn wasn't really going through with that promise. And so back in the one shot we covered, which was Thunderbolts International Incident, Swordsman made a deal with Arnim Zola to make a clone of his dead sister. And so we know that this clone right here has to be Arnim Zola's creation. He made the clone of the dead sister of Swordsman. Now, Norman Osborn is ticked off about this. He's kind of like, what? How is this possible? Know what? No. We're going to test her and make sure that this is actually your twin sister and not some kind of messed up thing pretending to be your sister. Now, of course, after being able to run some tests and to find out that basically this is the twin sister of Andrea Strucker, Swordsman, they are like, okay, it's her. This is a perfect clone of her. It's not a shapeshifter. Okay, now we know. But of course, for Norman Osborn, he hates the idea that somebody was able to actually fulfill his promise to Swordsman, because his goal was to never actually fulfill that promise to keep Swordsman on his team for however long he wants him on the team. Now, with that being said, Norman Osborn does know that it had to be Arnim Zola, the one who actually made the clone for Swordsman. Because remember, in the International Incident storyline, Arnim Zola got away thanks to Radioactive Man and also Swordsman, because Swordsman did make a deal with Arnim Zola to make a clone for him, a clone of his twin sister, which Arnim Zola technically did. Now, with that being said, Norman Osborn doesn't want to keep her around, nor Swordsman around, but at the same time, he knows that if Swordsman leaves, that means the rest of the team is going to try to leave. And so his main goal is to kind of get rid of the twin sister of Swordsman as a way to kind of keep Swordsman on the team a whole lot longer. And so it's Norman Osborn just plotting to get rid of Andrea Strucker, the twin sister of Swordsman. Now, this is where we actually do jump into the actual storyline of Secret Invasion. And the reason why I say that is because while you have Norman Osborn, Moonstone, Swordsman, and Songbird having a meeting about the twin sister of Swordsman, that is the moment they do get attacked by Captain Marvel. The problem is, though, this is Mar-Vell, and Mar-Vell has been dead for a good amount of years in Marvel Comics. Now, with that being said, the question is, though, why is he here now? Now, you do have the Thunderbolts try to fight against Captain Marvel, but of course, they do not stand a chance at all. But while fighting against him, that is the moment they realize that something is wrong with Mar-Vell. Like, he's talking weird. He's acting weird. He's acting like he doesn't know if he's actually himself or could be somebody else. Now, you do have Songbird mention his son, and to Songbird, she's mentioning his first son, Genis, who of course was Captain Marvel, then Photon, and then a different name. Like, that dude has so many different code names over the years in Marvel Comics. But either way, when it comes to Mar-Vell, he had no idea he had two sons. He only knew one son. So when it comes to Genis, he has no idea about Genis. He only knows about his other son, Teddy, of course, Hulkling. And as you know, Hulkling is the half Kree, half Skrull. Of course, Hulkling is the son of Captain Mar-Vell and also the son of the princess of the Skrull race. Now, with that being said, for this fake Mar-Vell, he has no idea about Genis, only Teddy, but he is able to take out the rest of the Thunderbolts team. Now, you actually do have Norman Osborn actually confront this Captain Mar-Vell, and you have Norman Osborn tell Captain Mar-Vell that Norman Osborn thinks that this is not actually the real Captain Mar-Vell, that this is something else, could possibly be a Skrull, because again, this is the tie-in to the Secret Invasion storyline. And so this is Norman Osborn saying, let's have a drink, let's talk, because I don't think you're Captain Mar-Vell. And the reason why you're freaking out because you're having a hard time balancing two different personalities at the same time, your real self and your fake self. Now, getting into the second chapter of this storyline, we actually do pick up with Norman Osborn talking to this fake Mar-Vell. Yes, it is a fake Mar-Vell because we know it is a Skrull because of Secret Invasion. Now, you do have Norman Osborn talk to this Mar-Vell about the idea of having two different personalities in one body. Because remember, in the old days of Marvel Comics, Norman Osborn would turn into the Green Goblin and not really remember being the Green Goblin. And so when he turned back into Norman Osborn, sometimes he would not remember being the Green Goblin. Now, later on, it was changed, of course, to the idea that Norman Osborn did know when he was the Green Goblin. Like, the Green Goblin is his more insane side of his personality. But it's Norman Osborn talking to this Mar-Vell, this Skrull, with the problem it's having right now, which is trying to balance two different personalities, the Skrull side and of course its Mar-Vell side, or pretending to be Mar-Vell. But of course, after their conversation, you do have this fake Mar-Vell actually fly off to go do his own thing. But basically, it's Norman Osborn kind of being able to get rid of this Mar-Vell, this fake one, and then telling his soldiers they need to get ready for war because he already knows what's happening right now across the world, which of course is that the Skrull invasion has begun and his team must get out there to fight against the Skrulls. And so right now you do have the Thunderbolts on their way flying over to Washington, D.C. to kind of help protect the Capitol. Now, with that being said, you do have Moonstone actually go over to Norman Osborn to tell her what she thinks about the twin sister of Swordsman, because it's just crazy how the same time she appears, there's a whole Skrull invasion happening. And so now this is Moonstone and Norman Osborn both believing that maybe Armin Zola did not have a hand in the creation of the clone of Swordsman's twin sister, that maybe this clone is actually a Skrull. But of course, you do have Norman Osborn telling his team that right now, the Avengers and Fantastic Four, they're going through a lot, because in the main storyline and their books as well, there is a lot of mistrust going on. But when it comes to the Thunderbolts, they never trusted each other at all, which of course helps them out. And so right now, this team is going to be used by Norman Osborn. He's going to fight as well as a way to protect the capital of Washington, D.C. Now, that is the moment we actually do pick up with the Thunderbolts fighting against the army of Skrulls that have basically invaded Washington, D.C. Now, of course, this is a great moment for Norman Osborn because you do have a lot of cameras recording this scene right now. And so it does help Norman Osborn look great in the eyes of America, because him and his team right now are fighting against the Skrulls as a way to protect the capital of the U.S. Now, of course, that is also the moment Norman Osborn realized he needs all hands on deck, which means Venom and Bullseye, they have been released to do whatever they can to help the team win the war. Now, Venom is usually under control, but Bullseye is not. He's a wild card. He's down to kill anybody he wants to, and he's down to kill you even if you're paying him. And so this is Bullseye being released to cause a lot of damage across the board, which is a huge problem. Now, that is the moment we do see a couple Skrulls watching the Thunderbolts fight against their army. And that is the moment you have these Skrulls basically tell us that the Captain Marvel we saw earlier was a Skrull. And of course, he was sent to kill off the Thunderbolts. But we know he did not, because he was having a hard time balancing the two different personas, his Skrull persona and also his Captain Marvel persona. But either way, you do have the Skrulls sending their big hitters to actually fight against the Thunderbolts for the time being. Now, that is the moment we actually do pick up with Swordsman and his twin sister Andrea, as you have these two guys right now just running around blasting Skrulls left and right. But as they're running around, that is the moment you do have Moonstone actually blast Swordsman in the back to knock him out. Now, the reason why she did that is because she wants to have a one-on-one conversation with Andrea, because she believes that Andrea is actually a Skrull. And so it's really Moonstone trying to join the side of the Skrull, hoping that they'll basically protect her if they do actually take over the Earth. And so this is her asking to have a one-on-one conversation with Andrea while Swordsman is knocked out. Now, things only get worse from here, because while you have the Thunderbolts fighting against the army of Skrulls, that is the moment they begin to play with the minds of the Thunderbolts, starting off with Pennis. Now, remember, Pennis used to be Speedball, but with that being said, thanks to him, Civil War, or really him and his team, Civil War was started because of him and his team, because they were being cocky and going after a certain villain named Nitro. That villain exploded and killed 600 people, including 60 children. And so right now you have the Skrulls playing mind games with Pennis to make him see a bunch of zombies of the dead people that he had killed, or basically helped kill. And so of course it's playing with his mind right now and messing him up. Now, for Norman Osborn, that is the moment he does see a bunch of Spider-Man, because remember, when it comes to Norman Osborn at this point, he's taking medicine as a way to keep the Green Goblin persona locked away. But of course, now with the Skrulls kind of playing mind games with Norman Osborn's mind, making him see a bunch of Spider-Men, of course, that Green Goblin persona is beginning to pop out. And if it does, it could technically lead to more problems for the Thunderbolts down the road in this storyline. Now, getting into the third chapter of the Secret Invasion tie-in for the Thunderbolts, we actually do pick up with Norman Osborn just shooting up Skrulls left and right, because remember, they're trying to play a mind game on Norman Osborn as appearing to be a bunch of Spider-Mans hoping to unlock that Green Goblin persona once again to make him go crazy and cause more problems for him and his team in front of the eyes of the public of Washington, D.C. Now, once you have Norman Osborn actually being able to get rid of these Skrulls, of course, he realized that there were no Spider-Mans in front of him. It was just a bunch of Skrulls shapeshift into Spider-Man to basically trick him. And he's able to kind of calm back down and lock away that Green Goblin persona once again. Now, getting back over to Moonstone and the twin sister of Swordsman, Andrea, you have to remember that Moonstone basically did knock out Swordsman to talk to Andrea, because Moonstone believes that Andrea is actually a Skrull, because Andrea has been dead and now she's here in front of the entire team. It has to be a Skrull. But that is the moment you have Moonstone find out that Andrea is actually not a Skrull. She is a clone. She's a clone body made by Armin Zola, which of course is a huge surprise for Moonstone. But this right here ticks off Andrea, because one, Andrea watched her brother get attacked by one of his own teammates, and two, is now some random lady calling her a Skrull. And so you have Andrea use her powers to knock out Moonstone. Now, right after doing that, you do actually have Andrea getting ready to kill off Moonstone, because Andrea is very angry at Moonstone. But that is the moment you do have Bullseye kind of giving Andrea the Elektra stab. And what I mean is that he stabs her right in the back, killing her off. And so that is the death once again of Andrea Strucker. Now, Swordsman has no idea how Andrea died because he's right now knocked out. And Bullseye and Moonstone are actually going to use this in their advantage. And the reason why I say that, because when Swordsman wake up, he's going to ask what happened to his sister. Moonstone and Bullseye can say that basically a Skrull was the one that killed his sister, not Bullseye. And they can also say that it was a Skrull who knocked out Swordsman, not Moonstone. And so this actually works out for Moonstone and Bullseye as they try to regroup with the rest of the team, carrying the body of Andrea Strucker and the knockout body of Swordsman. Now, this leads into the next part of Norman Osborn's plan, which is the radioactive man, because right now he's about to explode. And the reason why he's about to explode is because the Skrulls have basically shot him with enough energy to kind of make his powers go crazy. Now, remember, when it comes to the radioactive man, he's able to absorb a lot of different kinds of radiation, but at the same time, he's able to release a whole lot of different kinds of radiation. And so right now it's him right now being a ticking time bomb. But the problem is, though, if he explodes, that's a lot of radiation just floating around in Washington, D.C. And so Norman Osborn are going to use him like a bomb to blow up a bunch of spaceships of the Skrulls in space. And so you have Moonstone fly the radioactive man up in the sky, really into space, to blow up, to kill off a bunch of Skrulls. And then she's able to actually bring him back down to Earth, because Moonstone is able to make her body kind of like Shadowcat, intangible, had a hard time saying that word, so that she can avoid the attack, grab the radioactive man and actually bring him back down to Earth. But then this leads into another thing for Norman Osborn. And so getting into the next part of Norman Osborn's plan is to basically use Swordsman. Now, the reason why, because right now some of the Skrull spaceships have some kind of shields around them. And so they need Swordsman as a way to break through those shields. Now, the reason why I'm pointing this out is because as soon as Norman Osborn is able to wake up Swordsman, you have Norman Osborn actually tell Swordsman that the reason why his sister died is because because of a Skrull, not because of Bullseye. And so, of course, it's a way to kind of tick off Swordsman. Now, Swordsman is still upset with Norman Osborn because it was Norman who basically forced her to kind of help out the Thunderbolts in this battle. And so she technically died because of Norman Osborn. But either way, is Swordsman still mad at the Skrulls because he believes that they were the ones to actually kill his twin sister, not Bullseye, because we know it was Bullseye. And so this kind of leads into a bunch of pages where you actually do have the Thunderbolts just wrecking havoc. They are literally cleaning house of the Skrulls left and right. These Skrulls do not stand a chance at all against the Thunderbolts and Norman Osborn. Now, of course, this is Norman Osborn kind of setting up the idea that he should be the one in charge of protecting America, because right now is him protecting the capital of Washington, D.C. with his team. And nobody on his team had basically failed yet. Nobody on his team has been taken over by the Skrulls yet. And so this is Norman Osborn showing the world that him and his Thunderbolts are a great team, but also is him standing in the middle of the capital of Washington, D.C., claiming this country as his, saying that he's going to do everything he can to actually protect his country. Now, the first few pages of the 4th chapter is really more of Norman Osborn using his success of saving the capital of the United States of America as a way to kind of push the idea that he should be the one in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. or be the one in charge of protecting America over Tony Stark. Because after Civil War, basically Nick Fury left S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark was placed in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so this is Norman Osborn kind of using this moment as a way to paint the picture that basically he should be the one in charge. Now, in the main Secret Invasion storyline, it was told to us that thanks to Tony Stark's tech, the Skrulls were able to use his tech as a way to kind of move behind the lines without being detected by different kind of sources to tell the world that these guys are Skrulls. And so this is Norman Osborn saying that if the world had used Osborn tech instead of using Tony Stark's tech, then basically none of this would happen. They would have known that Skrulls were on the planet this entire time. And so this is Norman Osborn really using this as a way to tarnish Tony Stark's reputation. Now, you do have Norman Osborn tell his team it's time to go to join the rest of the heroes in the big battle in the course, the ending of the main story of Secret Invasion. Now, you do have the Thunderbolts actually go over to Manhattan, and that is where the big battle is actually taking place at. Right in the middle of Manhattan, you have the Fantastic Four, you have the Avengers, you have everybody there fighting right now in the big battle between the Skrulls and the heroes of Earth. Now, with that being said, though, you do have Norman Osborn going to use this moment in his favor. And what I mean is that as soon as the Thunderbolts do arrive and they do fight against the Skrulls alongside the heroes of Earth, well, most of them. Bullseye actually tries to kill off Spider-Man and Daredevil because, hey, he saw Daredevil and he's all like, this is the perfect chance to kill off that guy right here and now. But either way, you do have the Thunderbolts actually fight alongside the heroes. But here comes the big problem, though. Because we are actually going to use this moment as a way to wrap up this storyline, because you actually have Iron Man leave the battle. Now, of course, we know Iron Man is leaving the battle as a way to fix his armor, but you do have a camera actually pointing to Iron Man, and it shows the world right now, to their eyes, that Iron Man is actually running away. And of course, the American government actually sees that. They see Iron Man running away after putting Iron Man in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so it's kind of like the world's being invaded right now. America has been invaded, and Iron Man, their main guy who's supposed to protect America, is flying away. That is the problem. And of course, this right here, plus another moment that actually takes place in the main storyline for Secret Invasion will help Norman Osborn actually be in charge of protecting America. Now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video, but before I do want to tell you what else happens that basically helps Norman Osborn become in charge of protecting America, because he's the one who actually ends up killing the Queen of the Skrulls who were trying to take over Earth. And so with him doing that on live television, it kind of shows the American government that he should be the one in charge of protecting America. But with that being said, I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. And if you do, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.